You on the air? Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Concord Zoning Board of Adjustments September 2024 meeting. We will follow our usual procedure this evening, which is to say we will take the cases in the order in which they appear in the agenda. We will ask the appellant to step forward, be sworn in, and be seated in the chairs to my right, and offer any testimony that he or she would like us to hear. Excuse me. We ask them to confine their testimony, if at all possible, to a 10-minute interval. Following that, we will ask the opponent to step down, and we will solicit testimony from anyone in the audience who wishes to be heard in favor of the appeal. And following that, anyone in the audience who wishes to be heard in opposition to the appeal. After that, we will check in with code enforcement to see if there has been any, or there is any input from their office. And then, following all of that testimony, if there has been anything offered that appears to bear factual clarification, the appellant will have the opportunity to offer that clarification, not new arguments, prior to our closing public testimony portion of the hearing. In most cases, the board will act on each case prior to moving on to the next one. The first case this evening is case 0217, 375 North State Street, IN Industrial District. The owner is Swenson Granite Company, LLC, and the applicant is seeking a variance from Article 2869A to allow a freestanding 55 square foot sign where 40 square feet are allowed. Anyone here from Swenson Granite? Yep. Please come forward. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but. Great, thank you. I think it counts even if you have your hat on. Sorry, I said I think it counts even if you have your hat on. Please have a seat. Is there a sign in?
Yes.
Okay. After you testify, well, I'll ask you to identify yourself as you testify, but after you testify, if you would jot your name and contact information on that sign-in sheet, that would be helpful. Thank you. The floor is yours.
I'm Ray Corrival with Swenson Granite, and we want to build a sign at 375. It's going to be 55 square feet in area instead of the 40 square feet that's allowed. I have a picture of a finished sign here if you'd like to see it.
Sure. Is that the same one that was in the application?
Yes, same thing. Same. This is one we built in East Wareham, Mass. Right.
And this is a second sign? There'll be two signs there, is that?
Well, yeah, but the other one's on 369, and we want to put another one at 375.
Okay.
So the location that this application is about currently has no signs?
No sign at all.
So what's the rationale for exceeding the allowed square footage?
It's a new design the corporate office wants to go with, and it's just a little bit bigger than what's allowed, an extra 15 square feet. Isn't it like, this is what it's going to look like right here.
So it's just because of that round shape?
Well, yeah, the body's just a little bit bigger, but that round piece adds like another 10 square feet to it.
But the fact that your corporate office wants a bigger sign is not a basis for a variance. So there's got to be something unique about the property that justifies the variance. What is it that's unique about the property that justifies the variance?
We just want to conform to all other locations. We have 10 locations. Each location is going to have the same setup, so kind of like we look like each other. We want to all match. That's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
So but the application says that part of the reason for the sign is so that the public knows that the business is in two buildings? Is that a uniqueness of the
Everything's being moved over. The retail store is being moved over to the new building, 375. So all business will be conducted out of there. We still own the other building, obviously, but we're just moving everything over one building.
This isn't just asking for a second sign. This is asking for a bigger sign, and I'm not hearing any reason why it can't be a compliant sign other than they don't want it to be.
Is it, do you need the bigger sign to help people find, are you having a problem with people driving by and they can't find it?
I don't think so. I mean, it's the design we want to go with. That's, it conforms to all other locations. That's, we're trying to stay consistent with everything.
A brand.
Right. I mean, it's 15 more square feet, and in the general scheme of things, it's not really that much bigger than the 40 square feet.
Right.
Other questions from the board?
Trying to picture it, I think the sign in the property is elevated somewhat above the road, is that correct? Does that make it more difficult for people to see from the roadway?
It could, if they're going at a good clip of speed. I mean, it's not, elevation's not too bad, but it's definitely more elevated. And there's some surrounding trees and stuff in the front there that we want it to really stand out and pop. So that way people can see it, front and center when they pull up.
Okay.
Other questions? Is there anything else you'd like us to know?
That's all I got.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition to it? Any comments from code enforcement?
No, sir.
With that, we'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing, and I will invite the board to discuss the case, starting with Mr. Winters.
I kind of feel like we're almost being tested. I mean, it's a very, it is a very modest increase, but it's like we're almost trying to give him any opportunity to give us something, and he was a very honest, nice guy, so I give him credit for that, but I mean, he didn't really bite on any of our attempts to give any rationale about the property, so I'm just kind of at a loss as to what the justification is, other than it's just a little bit bigger, but obviously if that was the justification, it would kind of be a slippery slope on any application.
Ms. Spector-Morgan.
This isn't the first time we've seen this, and I appreciate all the work the board did to try and come up with a justification, but there isn't one. There's nothing unique about the property. There's no reason they can't comply with the sign. Their corporate office wants a bigger sign, and I appreciate that. That's a great business thing, but it's not a basis for a variance, so I would vote no. There's no unnecessary hardship here.
Mr. Monahan.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what colleagues have said, although the application offers a little bit of different information. The application says the reason is because they want people to understand this, guide the customers, let customers know there's an additional building, allow the property to properly guide our customers. Swenson Property allow us to build the additional sign to a new sign. I don't know, but I don't think there's enough of a record in front of us right now to get the yes.
Mr. Wallner.
Well, a couple of things. I mean, we've had arguments in the past about trying to conform to corporate standards, and I think at times we've granted that. But I sort of heard him say that, people might miss it because of the speed on that road. And maybe that could be construed as hardship, visibility. So maybe size is important in this particular case. That's a heavily trafficked road. Trying to find a place might add to distracted driving. So I think in terms of safety and so forth, I'd be persuaded to see it as somewhat of a hardship argument.
I didn't hear any convincing testimony to the effect that the 10 square feet made the sign safer. Yes, traffic moves along there, but it's not a superhighway. It's
30, 35 miles an hour.
arterial street.
Yeah.
So I suspect a sign that is the legal size could be made to make things clear to anybody passing by who's looking for the place. So I'm afraid I don't hear a convincing argument for a hardship, which means the rest of the criteria are moot. Would anyone, in my mind, would anyone care to make a motion?
I will make a motion to deny the requested variance on the basis that there is nothing unique or special about the property that would justify an oversized sign, and therefore we don't even need to reach the remaining criteria.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Hey,
The vote is 4-1 with Mr. Wallner in the minority. The variance is denied. That's a good example of a situation where the appellant really didn't understand what it is we have to do. And that's too bad, because it could be that it's a reasonable response, or request, but we have no way of knowing that.
I concur.
The next case is case 0218, 149 Portsmouth Street, RS Single Family Residential District, owner Sear William C. 2023 Trust. The applicant is requesting a variance from Article 2841H, Table of Dimensional Regulations, to allow the placement of a 10 by 12-foot shed in the front yard with a setback from the front property line of 5 feet where 50 feet is required, and a side property line of 6 feet where 40 feet is required. Is Mr. Seer here? Please come forward. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Would you identify yourself for the record as you testify, and after you testify, jot your name on that sign-up sheet?
My name is Jeff Barbarian, and I live at 149 Portsmouth Street.
Would you spell your last name for us?
Berberian.
What would you like us to know?
So basically, there's already a shed in place on the property in the same location that I'm trying to put a new one in. And the previous owners never got a variance, so I'm requesting a variance.
Did they never get a permit?
I believe not.
No permit on record?
No, sir, not for the previous owner.
Would you touch on briefly the rationale for variance that you include in your application?
Yep. So the requested setback relief will have no impact on neighboring properties and the community as a whole. The shed is designed to be aesthetically pleasing and will not obstruct views, light, or ventilation for adjacent properties. The relief will allow me to use the land effectively without causing any undue harm or disruption to the surrounding areas. Granting of the variance will not increase demand on fire, police, plowing, road maintenance, or other public service. If granted, the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. The spirit of this ordinance will be observed, and the general public does not gain anything from a denial of the variance. The variance is fair and reasonable. And finally, the placement of the new shed would be consistent with existing structures in the neighborhood.
Why not move the shed? Build a new shed elsewhere.
Well, with the setbacks, it's not practical. It's a corner lot. And they're saying the setbacks are 50 feet and 40 feet. So it would basically be in the...
Leaves you
where
no
the
place
house
to put
is.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
So right now, it's in the front corner, very close to
I
the,
call it the back corner, but according to the way things are written out, it's technically,
Oh.
it would be the front.
where's your front door, on Portsmouth Street or on Hampshire Drive?
Portsmouth Street.
But even though you consider it your backyard?
Correct, it is the backyard. It's the back corner of the
The
yard.
front door is here.
Yeah.
It's behind you on the
That's
screen.
their
He's
front
got two
yard,
front,
so that's his
technically two
backyard,
front
but
yards.
that's technically a front setback.
His door is here, right?
Right, yeah,
And
so
the
he thinks
shed's
of
here,
that
right?
as his backyard. No, that's the shed.
Oh, this is the shed, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, okay, got it. I see.
Other than this, David, it would be a 5-foot setback?
If it was
So
a
if you had a
side yard.
traditional lot that had a front, 2 sides, and a rear, and it was 50 feet from the front line, yes, it would be a 5-foot setback. So,
Wait.
and I just want to clarify in the screen up there, his shed is here.
Yeah, okay, yeah,
Just making sure, so he has 2 front yards technically by our zoning for setbacks. So when he says this is his front door, the plane of the house here, this be his front yard here, this technically could be his side yard if there was not for this street. And now it becomes a front yard because it fronts a street.
Are sheds allowed in
And
a
if
side?
that was a side yard, that would be legal?
I know what that's like.
Those are my questions.
More than likely, because it's, as long as he's 5 feet away from that property line, it probably would be legal and he wouldn't be here.
So sheds are allowed in the side yard or the backyard, but not the front yard, right?
Correct, but that's what he's here for, is the variance to put the shed where he wants,
Right.
setback wise.
Is the current shed, is it right on the property line, or is it
It's about 5 feet off right
5
now.
feet? Okay. So really the only
Basically
relief
be in
that,
the same location that's currently there.
so the only relief you really need, no less code enforcement, is with regard to the structure being in the front yard. Technically, you have 2 front yards.
Yeah,
with-
correct.
Okay.
Is it, how's it fixed to the ground, like on cinder blocks or?
I don't know, it's so old, I mean.
What's your
I'm
plan
sure
for the
it is.
new ones? Probably more important.
I'm planning to do a concrete pad.
So, well, going back to the question that Mr. Carley asked you, if, let's say the existing shed was not there,
Yep.
and you were just plotting where you're gonna put this new shed completely without any, you know, any preconceived notions about where the shed should go,
Honestly, I would still put it in the exact same location.
and why is that a good spot for a shed?
Because the side yard on the left is where we play with the kids and everything.
Yeah.
That way he's out of the street, he's got kind of boxed in there. And then, so on the other side, there's just cars going both ways.
And you prefer to have it farther from the house just to,
Yeah, so it doesn't take
And-
up all the yard space.
You still have some fencing behind it?
Yeah, so it's all fenced in.
There's-
The picture.
yeah, thanks.
Other questions from the board? Is
I
there
have
any-
one
oh,
other
I'm sorry.
question. What's on the other side of the house?
On the left side,
Yep,
that's a box trailer. It's no longer there.
okay.
Oh,
I was just parking it there for the time being.
Anything else you'd like us to know? Thank you very much. Don't forget to jot your name on the sheet. Is there anyone here who would like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone here who would like to be heard in opposition to it? Any comment from code enforcement?
No, sir.
With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. We have a request to replace an existing shed with a new shed in the same location. The old shed was not a permitted use or a grandfathered use. We heard testimony that because of the two front yards, the lot creates a situation where there really isn't a good place to put the shed, not in the setbacks. I'm going to start this one with Mr. Wallner.
Take out Hampshire Drive, if it didn't exist, he'd be in compliance. We tend to be pretty open-minded about corner lots. And I think therein lies the hardship for me, in that, I guess you could say he's being denied reasonable use by not being able to put it in the setback that would normally have been there had Hampshire Drive not been there.
Very good. Mr. Monahan?
Yeah, I agree with Nick. I think it's not unusual. The uniqueness of the property is that there are two front yards, and it would be kind of, I'll leave it at that. There's two front yards.
Inspector Morgan?
The convincing factor for me is that if this lot is 75, 77 feet wide and the setbacks are 50 and 40, there's literally no place else to put it. There's no conforming place to put it. So I would say the hardship is satisfied. And the others, it certainly doesn't look like it's going to alter the essential character of the neighborhood. I can't imagine it's going to diminish surrounding property values, and I don't see any substantial justice in denying it. And thank you for putting up the view of the greater neighborhood. I appreciate that. It certainly is not going to alter the essential character of that neighborhood. So I would be
Sheds
inclined to
everywhere.
grant it.
Mr. Winters?
yeah, I agree. I think in the past we've, I'm trying to remember where, but I believe that a corner lot in and of itself is not a hardship. However, I think this particular lot, because of the way it's configured, as Inspector Morgan said, there's no other place, and also that the existing shed has been there, which also is not in and of itself a hardship, but the fact that they've designed the rest of their yard around that shed being there, they put the fence sort of in a way to shield the current shed would require, I think, an unfair amount of changing of the layout for that to be fair, so I agree.
I agree with my colleagues. Would anyone care to make a motion?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Hall, I remember we spoke last month, should we go through
As
the
long as
criteria?
Inspector Morgan lets me use her,
Yeah, I'm sure she will.
It was verbalized during the meeting.
Better when I'm here, isn't it?
Yes, we voted on that last week.
Thank you, Laura.
My feelings are kind of hurt.
Thank you for checking in.
I don't know about this.
For the detail.
All right. We have been, it's been moved and seconded, and there has been a lot of rather flip discussion. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variance is correct. That brings us to case 0219, 114 Garvin's Falls Road, RM Medium Density Residential District. The owner is Danziger Properties LLC. The applicant seeks a variance from Article 2841H, Table of Dimensional Regulations, for the replacement of an 8x12 porch with a 12x20 porch with a front setback of 7 feet where 25 feet are required. Is Mr. Danziger here? Please come forward. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. Please have a seat. You heard my sermon on the subject of the sign-in sheet for after you testify.
Yes, I did.
Would you identify yourself for the record and let us know what you'd like us to hear?
So my name is Dennis Dandawa, Dandawa. I'm with Danziger Properties. We just recently purchased 114 Govern's Falls in Concord, and we have an extremely dangerous porch that's rotting and missing a lot of boards. And
And before you, I couldn't tell from the application which porch we're talking about. Is it the one on the street side?
Yeah.
it's the one right by the street, right there, right there.
That one on the side?
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So it's none of the platforms are involved in it. It's attached to the house.
So this is for that porch and the platform underneath it. There is a decking underneath it as well.
Oh, okay.
So
All right.
kind of combine it as a porch.
All of which is part of a porch.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and if I may, early on, the freestanding 25 by 25 deck does not need a variance. He has his front setback. He has DES approval to build that in the
Okay,
shoreline protection zone, so that's why that's not on the application.
okay.
Okay.
So it's the part that says, believe it or not, porch. Plans, okay. Please proceed.
So this property, especially this porch, is extremely dangerous the way it is right now. Personally, I've actually fell through one of the boards twice. One of the delivery guys fell through. Fortunately, he was not injured. So it's something that's I feel that needs to be addressed immediately. And the only way to address it is to replace it. There's no easier way of fixing it or trying to modify it. We just have to completely change everything. The board's in a bad state. Nothing is good about it. The proposed structure is necessary for the safety, accessibility of the property to residents and visitors, and will not affect any public or private rights of others. It will allow residents, guests, and emergency personnel access and to move around property safely. So to access the apartment, which is apartment 2, that is the only way you can get into the apartment, through that porch. So without that porch, there's no access to that apartment.
Is it a two-family house?
Yes, it is.
Assessing has it as a 4-unit,
A 4-unit?
yes.
Oh, okay.
So the second apartment has a top part, bottom part. That's why I'm calling this one
Okay.
2-unit. But the whole building, it's a 4.
Got it.
If that's what
Understand.
Gotcha.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
No. Pretty much, I don't think, or we don't think it will negatively affect any of our neighbors or our neighbors' properties. If anything, we believe it will actually enhance our neighbors' properties and values. So,
Did I read it wasn't going to encroach any further? Right? Is that what I
Is
saw?
it coming any closer to the road?
no,
No, that's what I thought I saw.
no, it's not.
Yeah.
I understand you want to make it a little larger than what's there now.
Yes, so because of the proximity to the road, the entrance that's there right now is the one to the road, and it's dangerous because it's so close to the road. So we're trying to create a different entrance, which is in the yard. That way they have an option, instead of going through the main road, which is pretty dangerous, they can go through the yard. So that's why we're extending it. Now, the reason we're extending it is because of the decking underneath. It extends a little further. The landscape of the property cannot allow us to put a second entrance without extending the deck itself, the porch itself. That's the reason why we're extending it, so that it kind of measures up with the contour of the landscape.
I understand.
Yeah.
Pitch of the ground.
The
and
pitch,
so on.
yeah, it's kind of on a hill, and it's very difficult to just replace, square footage by square footage. You almost have to do a few more adjustments, which is the extension, but which is going, not encroaching onto the road, but just the other part of the yard.
It looks like the house itself is in the setback, right? Am I reading that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Other questions from the board?
On this picture,
Yes.
which one is it? Is it?
So, no, it's not on
Oh, no,
that
no.
picture.
Okay.
Yes, it's not on that one.
So what is this?
That's just some more work that needs to be done, but it's not related to any variance. It does not need any
Oh,
variance.
okay,
This
okay.
one
Well,
here.
it looks good. So
Yeah.
This right here. This right here?
Yes, right there,
Yeah.
yeah.
So on this one, it's this part right here.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions?
There's a lot of work to be done, but some of it doesn't need variances. It's just.
Oh, you just have one package that you
Yes.
kind of insert there. Okay, got it.
Anything else you'd like us to know?
No.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition to it? Is there any comment from code enforcement?
All right, made, thank you.
With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. We have a request for replacing an existing porch, which I believe is already in the setback, correct?
Yes, the whole front of the plane of the house is in the
Right.
setback.
An existing porch, which is already in the setback, with a new porch, which would also be in the setback in the same location and a little bit larger. Your testimony that it needs to be larger in order for the plan access to the entry to work properly. Start this one with Mr. Monahan.
Yeah, I'm inclined to support it. I think that there is some uniqueness to this property, given the slope, the fact that it's already non-conforming in the setback, and I appreciate the safety issues by extending the porch to allow for better access to the units.
Ms. Spector-Moore?
I agree with Mr. Monahan with regard to the unnecessary hardship. Also, the existing sort of layout of the house and the entranceway and its existing location in the setback. Could you pan out just a little bit?
Yes.
I mean, I don't imagine it's going to alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Nope, I don't think it's going to alter the essential character of the neighborhood, to the extent you can call it a neighborhood.
This is his property.
It's not going to diminish surrounding property values to make the porch slightly larger, and I don't see any substantial justice, given particularly that the porch is already in the setback, in denying the variance, so I would be in favor of granting it.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Well, wait a minute, that wasn't a motion.
Wasn't a motion yet.
I'm just dozing off over here, enjoying a little nap. All right, and now I'm going to over to Mr. Winters, whom I nearly slighted here.
Oh, no offense taken there. I agree. I don't have anything more to add.
I agree also.
As do I. Would anyone care to make a motion?
I move approval.
Thank you so much.
Previously
For
stated.
the reasons previously stated, is there a second?
And I'll second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variance is granted. You're all set. You're welcome. That brings us to case 0221, 13 Dover Street, RM Medium Density Residential District. The owner is Christopher McAllister. The applicant is requesting a special exception for an accessory dwelling unit. Is Mr. McAllister here? Yes. Please come forward. truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you identify yourself for the record?
Christopher McAllister.
Please sign in when you leave.
I will.
What would you like us to know, Mr. McAllister?
Well, I brought a letter from my abutter of 17 Dover Street, who's on one side of the house.
We have a copy of that.
Okay.
I have a copy of it. I'll read it into the record.
Basically, to do this, I don't have to change the house, the footprint, or anything. When we did an addition back in 2018, it was built in a fashion to be able to have a little ADU down there. My mom died some time ago. The property's been in probate. It came out of probate, got into my name, so now I'm looking to get permitted for the ADU.
Very good. You did mention in your application that you believed you conform to all the requirements for a special exception. Did you want to bring us any detail on that, or?
Yeah, you know, it doesn't diminish the property values. I think it fits in pretty well with what was done. It's not going to add any nuisance to the public or any additional need for public safety or public services.
Are you on city water and city sewer?
City water and city sewer, yeah. So we're looking to add one bedroom and one bathroom.
Yep.
And I assume you've been made familiar with the requirement that one of the units remain owner occupied?
Yes.
Okay. So that would be part of the plan?
Yes. Yeah.
Other questions? Anything else you'd like us to know?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone here who wishes to be heard in favor of this appeal? Please come forward.
You want to sit here?
Yep, right up there.
Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening. Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but
I
it?
do.
Thank you. Would you identify yourself for the record, please?
My name is Robert Silva. I'm a resident with my wife Barbara at 11 Dover Street, which are neighbors to Chris McAllister. In fact, we've been neighbors of Chris and his family for more than 40 years. And our association has always been positive. And we're here to support his special exception.
Very good. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to be heard in favor? I do have a letter here from Jeffrey Lewis, who resides at 17 Dover Street, and he indicated that he could not be here. He had to be out of town, but he is directly adjacent to the applicant's property. His house has an ADU that was constructed in 2018 along the same common lot line as the ADU on his neighbor's property, and he believes that their ADU meets the spirit and intent of the ordinance, and he fully supports it. He requests that the board grant their request. Anyone wish to be heard in opposition? Any comments from code enforcement?
No, sir.
With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed, and I will open the floor for discussion, starting with Mr. Wallner.
Since it's a special exception, it does meet, in my opinion, all 9 criterias.
Good.
I have nothing to add.
I think this is exactly what we see in ADUs, so I think all the special exception criteria are met.
Mr. Williams?
Yeah, I 100% agree.
As do I. Would anyone care to make a motion?
I move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I'll just run through it. It doesn't appear it would create any traffic congestion, overload the current utilities, or make a demand on services. We have no reason to think the supplemental standards are not fulfilled, and it won't create any hazards to the general welfare. It's an appropriate location and consistent with the character of the neighborhood and the master plan.
Very good. We got a second, right? That was, Andrew?
Yeah, I think Nick made
It was
the
Nick,
second.
okay, all right. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The special exception is granted. That brings us to case, good evening, 0222, Hutchins Street RM Medium Density Residential District. The owner is LP Morgan Associates LLC. The applicant is requesting a variance from Article 2883C2A to permit the construction of a single-family dwelling on a non-conforming lot lacking the minimum 22 feet of frontage, and an exception to RSA 674-41 to allow the construction on a lot lacking frontage on one of 5 enumerated categories of streets. Good evening.
He was just gonna send you to the slaughter all by yourself.
All right. I was hoping. Notice I am closer to you guys too.
He's next to me, he's safe.
Gentlemen, do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but it?
Yes.
Thank you. Would you identify yourselves for the record, please, and fill in the blank over there when you're done testifying?
Sure. John Arnold from Warren Reno, representing the applicant. This is Alan Johns, is the owner, through LP Morgan and Associates. So I guess maybe just procedurally a little bit of background, because we have 2 requests tonight. Our first application is for a variance from the frontage requirements in the zoning ordinance. That's a traditional variance, something you guys are very familiar with seeing. The second application we filed is a request for a waiver from RSA 674-41, which is much less common. And I don't know whether the board's familiar with that or not, but RSA 674-41 is essentially a state statute that imposes a frontage requirement separate and aside from whatever a municipality provides in its zoning ordinance. That's the reason for the 2 applications. My intent is to address the zoning variance first. If we get beyond that, then to address the application on 674-41. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it's a pretty long statute. Which is the provision in the statute that gives us the power to?
Paragraph 2.
Thanks.
Which I'll delve into in a little bit more detail when I chat about that application.
Please
I'm
proceed.
just gonna interrupt. I have one application in front of me.
The memo only has the first one because we had a lot of dialogue this month. The notice was sent with both in there legally,
Okay.
if that's what you're talking about. But there is only one application. It should have had both. The memo with the monitor.
It's one application with 2 decisions for
Correct.
us. Okay.
But do the board members have the, I guess, the narrative that went with
Yes,
that
yes.
674?
But
Okay.
just so it's, you're asking for one element of relief, but basically have 2 alternative arguments. Is that?
No,
okay.
2 separate forms of relief. We filed 2 separate applications. Variance application first, which is what I'm about to talk about, variance from the city's frontage requirement.
Yeah.
If that's approved, I'm then going to address our second application, which seeks a waiver from RSA 674-41, which is the
Oh,
state
you have to get
imposed-
past both. Okay.
Yeah, it's the
Okay.
state imposed frontage requirement.
Oh, you have to. Okay.
Sorry, John. And then we've had a lot of dialogue, and I'm not positive that that request belongs here, and we'll talk about that when we segue into that discussion.
You're talking about the
674-41.
Okay. Please proceed, Mr. Arnold.
Thank you. Thanks, David, for putting up the GIS. So the property that we're here to talk about is right off of Hutchins Street. It doesn't have a number. It's highlighted on the GIS. Hutchins Street's right along the bottom of the map.
Is that referred to as track number 3 on the
Yep.
map?
And so the plan that's in your application shown as track number 3. So the lot's a pre-existing non-conforming lot. You can see on the GIS and on the plan in your applications, it doesn't have any frontage. It doesn't abut Hutchins Street at all. Access is via an easement along the highlighted portion now. It's about 50 feet wide up by Hutchins Street, where you can see a little bit wider, and then the longer, narrower section's about 25 feet.
Created by a subdivision approved by the planning board? Or does it predate that?
It predates
I think
that,
it
I'm pretty sure.
predates the subdivision approval.
Okay.
So So it's an old lot. So on the GIS, maybe I'll just walk up and point for
You
a
want to
second.
point here, John?
Is that easier? Guess so.
Whichever way you
If I do that? Thank you. All right, so here's track 3. This is the property we're talking about right here. This lot right here, this is 64 and a half Hutchins. Mr. Johns also owns this lot. It has a house right here that was built in the mid-1950s. This lot as well is shown as track 2 on the plan in your application. This, you can see here, it doesn't have any frontage on Hutchins Street either. Its sole access is also provided on this easement right here. The house on the corner, this is 64 Hutchins Street. You can see it does have frontage on Hutchins, but its access is also off of this easement over here. The driveway to the house is on this side. So this driveway that exists now serves both of these two properties. This one has no frontage. This one does have frontage.
Is this a dirt road or a paved road?
Dirt road.
Is it a road or is it a driveway?
Driveway. So the property that we're talking about, track 3 back here, that's an undeveloped lot. It's vacant, it's wooded, doesn't have anything on it right now. We're asking for a variance in this application from the city's frontage requirements to allow construction of a single-family home on this lot, not having any frontage on a public street. On the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance criteria, the variance won't alter the essential character of the locality, and it won't threaten public safety, health, and welfare. In terms of the character of the locality, as I mentioned, we already have a house right here at 64 and a half Hutchins that does not have any frontage on a public street. Lots with development on them without frontage is already an occurrence in this locality. The public safety, health, and welfare, we have a track record of about 60 years of this driveway providing access to both of these houses. We're not aware of any safety issues associated with that. Mr. Johns, when if he's able to build on this lot, plan to widen this driveway to some extent to improve the level of access that is to all of the lots on the driveway. I'd also point out that the distance from the property from here down to Hutchins Street is a little under 400 feet. And while that's a lengthy driveway by city standards, there are a couple of other properties in the area that have driveways that are longer than that, private driveways. One of them is at 56 Hutchins. That is a driveway that's about 600 feet just to the house, and then it continues beyond that to loop up to a barn and some accessory structures. And 31 Parish, down the road the other way, a mile or so, has a driveway that's about 800 feet. So in terms of, again, safety and access, a distance of about 400 feet, if this were considered, a driveway, we don't see that as detrimental or a significant risk to safety or access otherwise. On the substantial justice, the variance really wouldn't pose any harm to the general public. Allowing a house back here with no frontage, it's not going to be visible to the public. It's set back from the street. A lot of times with reduced frontage requests, part of the issue is that you end up with houses and buildings that are kind of close together or crammed along the streetscape and detract from the appearance of the streetscape. But a house back here won't have any impact on that. It's not going to be even visible from the street. And on the flip side of that, the benefit of the variance to Mr. Johns is very significant. Obviously, without a variance, this property is not usable for any purpose, and it sits vacant. The property has been shown as a separate lot for a long time. He's paid taxes on it as a buildable lot for a long time. This would allow it to be put to a use. On the property values, lack of frontage won't cause any negative impacts. The lot meets all the zoning requirements except for frontage. It's large enough to accommodate a house by the zoning requirements and also physically with the characteristics of the lot. And on the hardship, the uniqueness of the property, one of the uniquenesses of the property is the lot size. And this is really both sides of the coin. On the one hand, this is a relatively large lot when you look at the surrounding lots that are served by this easement. This is the only lot on this block of properties that meets today's zoning requirements for lot size and has significant buildable area on it. By contrast, the lots on the other side of the easement over here, there's a lot of wetland over here. And both of these lots are undersized. They don't meet the size requirements under the zoning ordinance. So in that sense, this property back here, tract 3 that we're talking about, is really the only viable lot in our eyes for any development. And that sets it apart from the other lots in the area. Now, that's why I say it's uniquely large. It meets the lot size requirements of today's ordinance, whereas the surrounding lots don't. On the other hand, it's a uniquely small lot. And what I mean by that is it's 1.5 acres. The lot is perfectly well suited for a single family home. But if building is not allowed on this lot, it's not really suitable for any other use. If this were a 10-acre lot, a 20-acre lot, something like that, perhaps it could be used for an agricultural or a forestry purpose. That's really not the case here with a 1.5 acre lot. It really can't be put to any use if not developed in some fashion. The public purpose of the frontage requirement is one, to ensure that there's safe and adequate access to development, and two, as I mentioned a moment ago, to keep things spread out along a streetscape, so you don't have buildings and houses all crammed next to each other and overcrowd the streetscape. And the thing that we have here is that this driveway has a track record of over 60 years of providing access to these two properties. And as I said, we're not aware of any safety or access issues related to that. The driveway would be extended slightly to get to this track 3, but only modestly, and even at that length, as I mentioned, it's still a shorter driveway than a couple of other driveways in close proximity to this. So we think that it's certainly feasible to widen this out, make it accessible, satisfactory to the fire department, and so on, so there aren't any safety concerns. And in terms of crowding the streetscape, as I mentioned, the house isn't visible. It's an entirely a back lot, so allowing construction on it won't negate that other public purpose of the frontage requirement. It won't result in the houses all jammed up against each other along the street. And the use of the property, the single family home, I think is eminently reasonable. It's probably the most reasonable use you can get. We're not looking to put a big commercial development out there or something like that. It's really just a single family home, which is a permitted use in the zoning district. I'd also argue under the alternative statutory criteria that we satisfy the hardship standard because the property is not usable for any reasonable use without this variance. As I said, any development requires a variance, and it's really not feasible to use a property this size for a non-development use like agricultural or forestry purposes. So I think that's it, but I'm happy to answer any questions or concerns that you might have.
Questions from the board?
I have a question. I don't know if you'll know the answer to it. So that right-of-way is obviously part of a much bigger lot.
Yep.
Do we know anything about what's going on that lot, what the plan is for that lot, like anything about that lot?
Wait, which lot are you talking about? The McGovern lot?
The big one.
The big one that the right-of-way is part of.
The one in back.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't.
Yeah.
My understanding is that it's not developed right now. I don't know if there are any future development plans for it.
It's under separate ownership.
Correct.
Is it all? That's all just wooded, or?
Yep.
So is the right-of-way deeded as a right-of-way?
Yes.
As far as the lots 2 and 5, I think it's tracks 2 and, are they both track 2? The two lots that you were saying you were
On the other side.
Contrasting them with and saying those can't be. So, but your argument here, of course, is if we don't approve this, it has no usable function. So why couldn't the owners of those two make the same argument? Because what's the function of those lots if they can't build on it?
The point I'm making with that argument is that aside from the frontage issue, this is a very developable lot. It's big enough in meeting today's zoning requirements, and it has plenty of upland to support a house. Whereas these lots over here, they have the frontage issue, but they also have a lot size issue, and they have wetlands issues. So in that sense, you know, zoning variances or not, these two lots are very difficult if able to be developed at all. And so that sets this lot apart. This is a prime lot that's suitable for development, but for the frontage issue, whereas neither one of these lots, in my opinion, are viable for future development because of other characteristics of the property, including size and wetlands.
Because if they did ever try to develop them, despite what you say, and say, well, we can fit it in, and whatever their claim would be, I mean, that would obviously, the more houses that tried to use that driveway, the less viable that driveway can be to serve that many, right? I mean, it might, maybe it could serve one more is what you're saying, but it really couldn't serve more than that, right?
Yeah, I think that realistically, the driveway is going to serve these three lots, these two that it already does, and this one that we're asking for, and then whatever goes on the property back here. I don't think it's realistic to think that that either one of these lots will be developed. Of course, to your point, who knows if someone comes in the future and argues that they're entitled to a host of variances to be able to develop those lots. The driveway here, just in terms of supporting use, this is a 25-foot wide easement, and you know, even for like commercial scale development in Concord, you need a 24-foot wide drive aisle for like a two lane driveway.
So can two cars pass, like going in different directions?
For 25 feet, they could. The driveway back here is going to need to be expanded and widened, which Mr. Johns intends to do if he gets approval to build on this lot back here. But my point is, at 25 feet in width, there's enough width to satisfy any issues or concerns with making it safe and accessible for fire trucks or two-way traffic or anything like that.
And the plan is to make the actual, like, driveway for the house itself off of that, correct?
Right, so
Onto the lot.
yeah, right near the front of the property, right down here.
Yeah.
So it would jog in kind of the way this one does and that one does.
Yeah.
But does the current driveway support two-way traffic?
Yeah.
It does, okay.
Other questions from the board?
Yeah, I'll ask the question, the applicant, maybe code enforcement, hopefully figure this out. Is an option, alternative option would be to convert the driveway to a private road?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on what you consider a private road. I think technically speaking, it is a private road or driveway. I think of them as being one and the same.
But
We
if
have a few of those
If it was actually
downtown.
an official private road, then the frontage issue would be resolved.
It possibly could be resolved if it was a private road, yes. If it was a city-accepted private road. But this is
Or
a
city.
driveway easement, which is gonna be part of the second portion of the argument. He's just saying right now he has a non-conforming lot without any road, without the required 22 feet of frontage on a city-accepted street, and that's his variance request for the first half.
Yeah, so I think what
Does
you're getting at is that the city has designated some certain private roads that it allows construction on, but that really deals with the second application. The frontage requirement under the zoning ordinance still applies even to those, so you need a zoning variance, even if the city said this is a private road and you can build on it. The 674-41 application is the issue that deals with the state mandated frontage requirement, and that's where kind of the city council approved private roads comes into play. That doesn't have any bearing on the zoning frontage, if that makes any sense.
I should have brought my chart. I have a whole chart
So
Chart on
the
private roads.
frontage
on
requirement,
674-41 and zoning laws and how they interact.
So how's he doing?
He's doing great.
Mr. Arnold, would you like to produce your chart, please?
so what you're
So
saying,
just while we're on this topic though, either you or, does Concord have any private roads?
Oh, yes, we have
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of class 5, class 6s that have been accepted by city council
Okay,
to be buildable.
Some of them are
So
so
when we're
tight you
looking
can't
at-
put two cars down them at the same time.
when we're looking at frontage issues from the city perspective, do the frontage requirements on a private road the same as the frontage requirements, for example, on a city road?
Yes,
So if this were a private road instead of a driveway, it wouldn't
They'd still
be
be here.
here, right?
They would under the 670.
They'd still
They'd
be
be
No,
here
but
for
would
the
they-
state
yeah, right,
exception.
but they need a variance.
if it was a private accepted street, it's possible they would not need to be here, correct.
Oh, so the frontage, that counts as frontage if the city, and who,
If the city council would have accepted it as a private road,
so city council has to do that?
correct.
I don't think think that's correct. I think that if.
Maybe I'm missing the question
I
wrong.
think that if the city, say the city council designated this as a private road and allowed construction on it, my understanding, my belief is that that resolves the 674-41 application, but that it doesn't resolve the zoning requirement that we have a certain amount of frontage on a public street. I think the way the zoning ordinance is drafted is we need frontage on a public street either way, and I've been in front of this board asking for frontage variances on lots that are on lots that have been approved for private roads that have been approved for development, and just haven't had to deal with the 674-41 side of it.
Well, why don't you address that?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
674-41. Would you like me to do that? They're two separate applications. I was going to move to that if I got over the zoning variance hurdle, but I can if you like.
Well, we could certainly do it that way. What's the board's pleasure? Would you like to hear the variance first, or do we want to go ahead and listen to the 674?
I personally think we should resolve the variance first, let any abutters on that testify if they want, and then decide that issue and then move on to the 674.
Okay, what do you think, Laura?
Yes, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, we can proceed. I just, so you better understand, I just think that, I'm not sure that I'm convinced that the private road approach wouldn't resolve this, in particular because I don't know what's going to happen with the giant lot on the other side of it.
Right.
And I know it's not fair to this applicant,
Right.
but nonetheless, it's something.
What does the zoning ordinance say
Is
exactly
that-
about frontage?
I'm getting there, but if I can answer your
Nick,
question.
do you think we should go ahead?
Yes.
Okay.
So once you make a determination on the 22-foot of frontage, if you say yes, you grant that variance, it doesn't impact the next discussion other than, will you give him the approval, or does he have to go to city council for the approval? That's going to be the argument. You're not going to deny him 674-41 access.
Okay. And then.
Fair, John? Are you okay with that?
Wait, can you repeat?
Well, 674-41 allows people to either go to the city council or this board.
Even if it's a private road?
If it's a private road, 674-41, if it satisfies one of the criteria under paragraph 1 of 674-41, they don't have to go anywhere. They can get a building permit.
Right, so
Yeah.
that's,
But
okay.
they didn't satisfy
But
those.
they don't right now.
A through
Right.
E or
But
Correct,
if they,
yes.
and so my other question on the private road, if it's a city council approved private road, is that a public way?
That's what he's looking at right now.
Yeah.
Right, so conditions for development of a non-conforming lot in any residential district, a one-family detached dwelling may be constructed on a non-conforming lot permitted by 2842, the table of principal uses. The lot has at least 22 feet of frontage on an accepted city street.
So let's look up
When I-
City Street.
It's a private
So let's
road,
look up
a
City
city
Street.
council
Right,
approved
well, that's
private
what I'm
road.
gonna
Right,
go.
the fact they use accepted suggests that it could be.
That's
That
what
it could
that's
be
how I
private.
would have thought if they accepted it as a private road, but let me go to their list of accepted streets and see what they give us there.
But my guess is because this narrows beyond, because the right-of-way narrows closer than 50 feet, my guess is it would never be an accepted city private street because most accepted city streets, they're gonna want a 50-foot right-of-way.
I just, again, unfair to this applicant, I'm just, maybe not unfair, but observing that we could end up with a driveway that serves dozens of lots.
So that's the fear.
Are all the downtown roads 50 feet wide?
Probably not because they're old.
Oh, yeah. So if they were
Some of
trying
those
to
could
make
be
one,
one way.
yeah.
I wonder why the state felt the need to get involved in this question.
Probably because zoning boards are approving driveways with lots of houses on them.
A lot of zoning ordinances limit driveways to serving 3 houses.
Yeah.
Does ours?
I don't know.
I've never heard of that requirement,
Oh,
at least not in Concord. That
yeah,
doesn't mean it isn't there.
that's a question.
I have 3 houses at my house on private drive.
Yeah.
But I have a debate all the time about what's the difference between a driveway and a private road. And the answer is often nothing. It's just what you're calling it.
Oh,
Yeah.
find a definition?
So my interpretation, real quick, and this is always fun when you reread the ordinance, is this is an RS, what zone are we in? Our M zone would need, if it had sewer, it'd need 100 feet of frontage. If it did not have sewer, it'd need 200 feet of frontage. If it was a city-accepted street, as a Class 6 street, I would be able to issue a building permit if it met that minimum frontage. If it did not have that 200,
On a class 6 street, that's different from a private street, because class 6 street is a public street.
okay, I'm sorry, this is on
Class 6 is a
unaccepted streets.
non-town maintained.
Yeah, but it's still a public street.
Okay.
So you're saying he would not need a variance if this was an accepted street and he had enough frontage?
Right.
None of which is true, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, I think it's the consensus of the board that we're going to address the variance question first, and then we're going to get into the state law and to what extent we have any say-so on that. So, anything else you'd like us to know on that subject?
No, thank you.
All right. Find out if there's anyone here who wants to be heard. Is there anyone who wants to be heard in favor of the variance appeal? Is there anyone who wants to be heard in opposition to it? Any comment from code enforcement?
Not on this application.
All right, in that case, we'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing. We have a request for a variance to permit a house to be built on a lot that is served only by a right-of-way, which is not an approved public street, therefore it has no frontage. We heard testimony that the lot can't be used without this variance, and that in every other respect would comply with the requirements of the ordinance in this zone. I'm going to start this one with Ms. Spector-Morgan.
I thought you might.
Or with a short nap.
Well, frontage variances are hard because the property can't be used at all without the frontage variance. But frontage requirements are among the more important zoning requirements because their purpose is to create safe and sane access to the property. And more than that, they are, in my opinion, the ones where you really need to look at the cumulative impact of granting many such variances in particular, because once you bring this road up to this lot, maybe these two lots don't get developed because they have wetlands, but that doesn't mean there's not going to be further subdivision. So for me, I have a real concern about the impact on the character of the neighborhood from this one house, because there's not a lot of developed properties out there, and from additional houses, a potential cumulative impact. I have a concern about the public health, safety, and welfare, because this is going to be a long driveway that potentially fire trucks and ambulances need to get up. I don't think it's going to diminish surrounding property values. On the substantial justice prong, I do think there is a benefit to the public from denying the variance, again, from the emergency services point of view, though I understand the loss to the applicant is great. However, he did purchase it knowing full well there was no frontage, and knowing, I assume, that he couldn't build on it without that frontage. So then we come down to the unnecessary hardship, and is there anything particularly unique about this property that makes it burdened by its lack of frontage in a way that other lots wouldn't be? And I don't think there is, so I am not inclined to grant this variance.
Mr. Monahan, how do you see it?
There's a lot going on here, right? And so, as I said, you know, the applicant's kind of kicked up a hornet's nest of what else, and I don't think it's as necessarily all that fair to give him the burden of what could happen beyond this, although we have to keep it in mind. So I haven't made up my mind yet. I'm willing to listen to the other members of the board. And only to say, my probing and questioning around the private road was a way to try to get to a more acceptable
Sure,
way
yeah.
to deal with this, so that all the property owners and the city is aware of more activity taking place in this deeded easement. But I don't yet know if that
And without
gets people to yes or not.
Without a deep dive into the zoning ordinance, I don't.
Right.
Mr. Winters?
This is the first time I've ever had the thought, I wish some of the abutters were here. I was waiting for these two guys to come up. Because it is sort of interesting. I mean, there's this huge McGovern lot that owns this right away, and then there's these other two lots, and that people are presumably owning for some reason. Maybe they just sort of acquired them through happenstance and don't pay much attention to them. But it to Laura's point, if they all made a similar argument, or if the McGovern lot really was going to develop it, which I have no idea if that's feasible or not, then yeah, that this driveway becomes totally unfeasible.
Or it becomes a public road. I mean, at that point, it
Yeah.
gets developed as a public road.
Yeah,
Which
but
I think is a significant,
without hearing anyone else,
has a significant effect on the way I see it. Go ahead.
Yeah, but without hearing any of them, and they've all been noticed, and if they had similar lots, it could be a race to the zoning board to try to get the first variance. But I mean, I'm going to accept the representations that the two lots, the side lots there, are not developable, or would be difficult to develop. And the back lot, I mean, that would be a huge development. That would be a completely, would require all kinds of discussion, probably not just with us. So I'm not really going to pin them to that. So I'm to add this one. I'm since it otherwise is a nice shaped lot that really meets all the requirements. It could easily fit one house, and he's going to expand the driveway, and it allows two access. So I think he's convinced me that does make it a unique lot for this specific plan. So I'm willing to accept that.
Mr. Walner?
Yeah, I agree with Andrew. It all hinges on reasonable use. And I'm persuaded that really the only reasonable use is to make it a buildable lot. So I'm inclined to support the request.
And if I could just add a little commentary, just as a realtor who's sold several properties downtown, there are properties that we have to park on main roads and walk up some of these private driveways because they barely even have enough room for 1 or 2 car parking. For this to be able to be such a large lot that allows for a full driveway off of this private drive, I think that's reasonable and allows for plenty of room for turnaround and stuff like that, and safety.
If our granting this were to open the door to any development that we have no control over, or that the city has no control over beyond this lot, then I'd say the concern about future development out there ought to apply. But in this case, I don't see that. We are, if somebody were to try and develop, I think you referred to it as the
I just called it the McGovern lot.
McGovern
That's the owner.
lot, the large lot that directly connects with this right away. They would have to answer the same question that this lot does. And it would be unreasonable from my point of view for the zoning board to say under those circumstances, no, you need a real street. We're not going to grant a variance there. And I suspect the planning board would say the same thing. We don't know that, but we certainly don't know that our granting this prohibits that or makes that unlikely. So to me, that's not a concern, a negative concern. I do see the lot as being, it's certainly being a reasonable use, and it appears to me that as Mr. Arnold suggested, you can't use it at all under the old Governor's Island standard. That's a pretty strong recommendation for hardship. So, and it's a single-family house we're talking about here, not an apartment building with 100 people in it. So I think I do see a hardship for the lot. As far as the character of the neighborhood, it's already residential, individual houses on more or less rural-type country lots, as I understand it. Can you turn on that photo?
You want the overlay, you mean?
Yeah, the photo, the area photo.
So that's his lot.
Mr. Arnold, can you point at his lot with the magic marker? Okay.
This is the lot we're talking about there.
Right. So the whole area is more or less wooded, correct? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we're talking about another single-family house in a generally wooded area among other single-family houses in a generally wooded area. So I don't see that as making any difference to the character of the neighborhood, and they're not asking for any variances relative to anything other than the access, which is the safety issue. If it were necessary, I think they could get a fire truck back there. And it would certainly be in the interests of anybody owning that place to make sure that it was arranged so that they could. So I'm inclined to agree with my colleagues who see a hardship here and who do not see any contravention of the character of the neighborhood. I don't see the public benefit of denying it quite as strongly as Ms. Spector-Morgan does. On the other hand, I do definitely see a downside for the appellant because he can't develop the lot. So I would be inclined to support a motion to approve for those reasons. I was going to just say I agree with my colleagues, but that was just not going to work. So, we've all had our say. Would anyone care to make a motion either for or against the granting of the variance?
I move to approve the variance. I think Mr. Carley just laid out a lot of the elements, but I could go through them briefly.
I think in this case it would be a good idea.
The hardship, as was just referenced, is that there's no other usable function of the lot, and I think the spirit is observed. I think substantial justice is done, essentially for the same reasons, and the value. I don't think the value will be diminished. No neighbor has come forward and said this is going to change the characteristics of the neighborhood, and little enforcement would result in a hardship. I think I covered that.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
The vote is 4-1. With Ms. Spector-Morgan in the minority, the variance is granted, which takes us into the territory of 674:41.
Thank you.
If you would, we all have seen a copy of the statute, which is to say we understand it, but we've seen it. So if you could address what you think the role of the ZBA is in this case,
Sure.
that would be helpful to me.
So, 674-41, as I mentioned, it's referred to as zoning at a state level. So just ignoring the zoning ordinance for the time being, as we addressed that with the variance that you just heard. This statute says that for a building permit to be issued on a lot, it needs to have frontage on one of 5 different enumerated categories of streets. And if you don't have frontage on one of those 5 enumerated categories of streets, you either can't build, or you can apply to the zoning board to ask for a waiver from those requirements. And the statute sets forth criteria that you need to meet in order to get the waiver, which are in the application. I'll address them in a minute. But the theory is similar to a variance in the sense that the zoning board has authority to waive the frontage requirement that's imposed by the state statute.
Very good.
That's sufficient?
Yeah, does anyone have any questions? It's pretty clear to me. Then perhaps the criteria would be the next place to start.
Actually, I did have, we should be reading RSA 674-41, Roman 2,
Roman 2, correct.
and it talks about our role being involved. There needs to be an appeal of a decision by an administrative officer.
Right, and so
Has there
that,
been a decision by an administrative officer?
I believe there has, although not a formal written opinion. It's similar to when we apply for a zoning variance. There's usually not a formal written decision denying a building permit by the zoning enforcement officer or the building inspector. I've had a number of conversations with David here and also with the deputy city solicitor, and everybody agrees that we don't meet any of the criteria in section 1. So in that sense, I think formally speaking, this is appealing that decision, but there's not officially a written determination that's been made.
It's kind of an odd use of the word appeal because Mr.
We're
Hall has
agreeing.
he has no authority to grant
Okay.
it.
And we agree that we don't meet the
Yeah.
criteria, so we're not appealing in that sense, but we're
Yeah.
asking for a waiver, which I think paragraph 2 refers to as an appeal.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's fine, thanks.
So the first criteria, and this is all, I'm breaking them out individually. The zoning ordinance, in fact, breaks them out individually, but they're all kind of blended into that long narrative in paragraph 2, so they're not easy to identify when you're reading it. But the first criteria is that the denial of the building permit would entail practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship. A lot of what I'm going to say overlaps with what I said with respect to the variance application. The criteria, I think, are similar, even though articulated differently. And the practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship here, again, is that without a building permit, there's no construction on this property. And with no construction on this property, there's really no viable use for it. Again, for the reasons I said, it's not a suitable property for agricultural forestry, something with a larger acreage. So we're talking about a completely vacant property. If we were talking about a property that, for instance, had an existing single-family home on it today, and the building permit application was to put an addition on it or to add a garage, I think, maybe there's an argument there's no hardship there because there's already a reasonable use of the property that's going on. Or if the building permit was to build some, mansion or apartment complex, I think that might be a different situation. But here the hardship and the practical difficulty is that there's nothing there today, and there can't be anything unless there's a waiver granted to the statute. The second criteria is that the circumstances of the proposed building do not require that the building be related to the existing or proposed streets. So this is a pre-existing lot without frontage. The other property, as I mentioned before, 64.5 Hutchins right below it. That's another property right here that doesn't have frontage and has a home on it. The easement that we're talking about already serves 2 other homes. And so there's really no reason why a house on this property back here on tract 3 needs any more relation to Hutchins Street than the house that already exists on tract 2 at 64.5 Hutchins Street. The third criteria is that construction will not distort the official map or increase the difficulty in carrying out the master plan. So here we're only talking about a 1.5 acre lot and a single family home. We're not proposing a major development. It's really not going to have any impact on the official map or the master plan. It's a very minor development, about as minor as you can get. The fourth criteria is no undue hardship. There will be no undue hardship to future owners of the property. So I mentioned a few moments ago that the distance from Hutchins Street up to this property is about 380 feet. And there's a couple other driveways in the area that I mentioned, one over 600 feet, one about 800 feet. So having a driveway and maintaining a driveway of that length, I don't think creates any undue financial burden. And the other thing that we have here is we have multiple property owners sharing in that burden because this easement serves corner lot, second lot, and will serve this lot. So any financial expenses with the upkeep of that driveway are going to be shared by multiple parties, which further reduces any financial burden to the future owners.
The fifth criteria is that there's no undue financial impact to the city. So there's really not going to be any financial impact to the city here. This is a private driveway. The city's not going to be asked to or expected to maintain it. So there's no impact, financial impact to the city other than just the general services of new home construction anywhere. And the sixth and final criteria is that there will be suitable access for public safety and emergency access. We talked a bit about this in the last application. We've got a track record of over 60 years with this driveway providing suitable and safe access to the two houses that are already on it. And we've got a width of 25 feet for the easement, and Mr. Johns intends to widen and regrade and make sure that that driveway is suitable to provide access to that third lot if approved. So we don't believe there'll be any issues with safe access by a fire truck or ambulance if need be. And those are the 6 criteria. There was some discussion at the beginning of the hearing about whether we should be here asking for a waiver or whether we should go to the Planning Board and City Council and ask for this road to be designated as an approved private street for development. And I guess I would just say that the statute provides 2 alternatives. And I recognize that the statute says that we could go to the planning board, we could go to the city council and ask the street be designated as a private street, and if they said yes, that we wouldn't need this waiver. Just by way of kind of practical explanation, the reason why we're here tonight is because we needed the zoning variance. And as a matter of efficiency for a taxpayer on a single-family home development that is not a major moneymaker, but just building a single-family home, there's a degree of efficiency that goes into it, and since we were coming here anyways, we thought it was appropriate to ask the board for a waiver, and we think it is related to the zoning variance that was granted before. If we went to the planning board and the city council and asked this be accepted as a private road and allow development on it, I suppose it's possible that the planning board and city council say yes to that, and we don't need the waiver. That would also involve several more months and applications and hearings and expense for the applicant. So in that sense, this seemed like an efficient way to go, and if the board says no, then the applicant may decide to embark on that alternative course. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but that's just an explanation for why we're here tonight. I also think would just point out that the statute doesn't impose any requirement that we pursue planning board and city council avenue before we come to the zoning board. And perhaps there's a more compelling argument. We have a hardship if the city council and planning board said no to designating this as a buildable private road. But I think that the hardship is there either way. And the hardship was recognized in the last application with this being a non-usable property absent the relief. So
Isn't there a case that says you can do either?
There
Doesn't
is.
the Black Road case say that?
yeah, it's a choice. You can go either way. And so if the board felt inclined to send us to the planning board and the city council before being willing to grant a waiver, I just see it as a bunch of extra time and expense for the applicant without really reaching a different endpoint. If we go there and the planning board and city council says yes, then he can build, and that's fine. If the planning board and city council says no, then presumably we're back here and we have another argument on hardship, and maybe the board's more inclined to say yes at that point because the city council has said no, but again, we wind up in the same place that I think we are tonight without several more months and several thousands of dollars of legal expense. So that's just my explanation for why we chose the path that we're on.
Other questions from the board? It sounds to me like in this case, I don't think we have to necessarily follow the usual procedure that we do with variances in terms of soliciting testimony and so forth. What does the board say to moving on to this, or should we go through the questions of whether or not anybody else has comments?
Oh, I think we should go through.
Okay.
You might be right, but to be cautious, I agree.
Is there anyone here who wishes to be heard in favor of this request for a waiver? Is there anyone who wishes to be heard in opposition to it? Is there any other comment from code enforcement?
Thank you. Yes, tonight there is a little bit, as John Arnold has discussed, we've had a lot of discussion. I've worked with planning board and other staff in the city, and it was our interpretation, and no offense, I'd love to see your chart, but that the ZBA did not have authority over this. We really felt it belonged at least planning board for comment and city council. To your point, what's going to happen in the back lot, they can establish the standards for what they want for that driveway, for any future development, safety issues. If you do lean towards approving this, I would please ask that you condition it that they at least sign the same limits of liability that they would have to sign to city council, which would basically exempt the city from having to worry about who maintains that driveway, and can we get a fire truck here, can we get an ambulance there, will not be our concern. It's not a city-accepted street. It is a driveway easement.
RSA does make some reference to that, doesn't it?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So I'm saying if you're going to approve it, to let them build, please make that a requirement of their permit, that they do sign that limited liability waiver.
But, I mean, I can understand why the city would prefer it go to the planning board or city council, but I mean, the plain language of the statute does say the application may be made to the ZBA or the local legislative body or the Board of Appeals. So.
I understand what you're saying, but
Yeah, no.
I have two lawyers saying you can do this, so I'm hard pressed to try to justify.
No,
how
but go
I
ahead.
got to
We're
where
not.
I was.
We can get it.
This doesn't meet any of those first 6 criteria, the 5 types of roads at all. This is a driveway easement.
Okay.
It starts at 50 feet, drops to 25 feet. I just have big concerns that we're allowing a building on there, or a third house, have no history of how the first, or the second one that doesn't have any frontage got built. It was built in the mid-50s. It happened. But it doesn't mean we have to extend the errors of the 1950s into today, when we have tools that are, we have the ability to refer this to planning to say, listen, what should we be doing here, or is this a good use of this property? I shouldn't say it that way. We know it is. I fully supported the hardship for the 22 feet. I think that makes sense. I just have a concern of a driveway easement accessing a property that far in.
Putting aside your procedural reservations, which I fully understand, in this particular instance, do you have an opinion about whether there's enough, this driveway provides enough access for emergency vehicles to this house?
I've never driven out there to look at it.
Fair enough.
Mr. Arnold, do you have any comments in response to what Mr. Hall said?
Well, I mean, I respectfully, I guess, disagree for the reasons I articulated in my presentation. I think it is appropriate for this board to make the decision on the waiver, and I think that to answer Mr. Winter's question, the driveway doesn't exist all the way back to that third lot right now.
Right.
It would still need to be cleared and cut, and the intent would be for it to be widened and graded to provide that access. And as I said, there's a 25-foot wide easement there, so it's sufficient width to comply even with the 24-foot wide drive aisle requirement for, like, commercial driveways and things like that in the city. So.
Very good. With that, we'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing, and I'll invite the board to discuss the question of whether or not we should grant a waiver to 674-41. As I understand it, there is no question of acting in the negative. We either grant the waiver or we don't. We don't say you can't do it. That's territory for others, and as Mr. Arnold suggested, it could come back to us again in that respect. So, given your encyclopedic knowledge of the chart, the flip chart with all the good stuff on it.
I'll bring you the chart.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask Ms. Spector Morgan to give us the benefit of her thoughts on this, and then obviously ask everyone to weigh in.
So waivers under 674-41 for me are even harder than regular variances, and not for the reason you would think, because I don't think you have to find unnecessary hardship for the waiver. You can go on practical difficulty, And I think we have the practical difficulty here. And I think that we have, this would not tend to distort the official map or increase the difficulty of carrying out the master plan. And it's not going to cause hardship to future purchasers or undue financial impact to the city. But someday the Supreme Court is going to tell me under what circumstances the building does not need to be related to the existing or proposed streets. They haven't done it yet. Until they do, I cannot imagine a situation where the building does not need to be related to the existing or proposed streets. So for me, I cannot vote to grant a waiver from 674-41 because the building needs to be related to the existing and proposed streets.
What do you mean by that, related to the streets?
Excellent question, I don't know. But
Related
when
to-
the circumstances of the case do not require the building, structure, or part thereof to be related to existing or proposed streets.
Wait, sorry, where's that language? Is that it?
It's in, right here in the second line.
Oh, thank you.
You mean
Okay, I
related
got
to
you.
Hutchins Street?
Mm-hmm.
So how would that work in other private driveways that are already existing?
I don't know how those got approved.
They probably didn't. Oh, we mean in other locations?
Right, yeah, other parts of town, we have them, at least
Yeah, well, obviously we can't.
Where's the
3 or 4 or
Can't,
5
Oh, down here.
announce
downtown.
on that.
How I have explained this to my clients is generally this is when you have a hunting shed out in the middle of nowhere and you can take a four-wheeler out there or a snowmobiler out there and you don't need to get a truck out there and you don't need to worry about a fire truck getting out there. And I know this, we can get a car out there, we can get a fire truck out there, we can get all that out there, but the building has to be related to the existing street. And it's not related to the existing street with a street. So, for me, I can't vote to grant the waiver.
Right. Is it because you haven't, there's no record in front of us where the applicant has said this is how it relates to Hutchins Street?
No, he hasn't explained to me why it doesn't need to be related to Hutchins Street.
You did. Want to reopen? I'll restate it.
You said that you don't think it needs to be any more related to Hutchins Street than this other building, but that's different from saying
Yeah, I
it
don't
doesn't need
want
be
to get a
related.
dialogue
Yeah.
going back
Yeah.
and forth
So,
between
for
two.
example, if it were connected, if it was connected to water and sewer that came off of Hutchins Street, is that related to?
Nope, not for me.
Oh, you're saying for related to you means directly accessible from that street?
Yep.
But by definition, that seems a little circular, because then how could we ever approve it? Because by definition, it's not related to the street, it doesn't have any frontage.
Yep. I didn't write the statute.
You're saying, right, because the statute's really bad.
The statute's really
So the
bad.
applicant's a victim of a poorly written statute?
I mean, and
So
obviously,
you either follow a really bad statute or make an exception.
I mean,
make
sorry
a
to go out of order,
waiver
but
to it.
yeah. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not. You're way more versed on this than me, obviously. But I'm just thinking, without better guidance, the plain language. We can't exactly interpret a statute to be purposeless. So to give it a little broader interpretation, it's related to the street because it's near the street. I mean, it's somewhat accessible from the street. It's just the driveway that it attaches to.
There's a curb cut,
Yeah.
Except that the statute goes on to say
Yeah.
that, where is it?
Where is it that they cover the issue of relating to the street?
It's in the second line of paragraph 2.
When the circumstances
the
do
other
not
side.
require the building or
When
part
the
thereaf.
circumstances of the case do not require the building, structure, or part thereof to be related to the existing or proposed street.
I'm not the only one here that's not an attorney, right?
And to go to Andrew's point, if you look at paragraph 3, it specifically says, for the purposes of paragraph 1, the street giving access to the lot means a street or way abutting the lot and upon which the lot has frontage. It does not include a street from which the sole access to the lot is via a private easement or right-of-way, unless such easement or right-of-way also meets the criteria set forth in subparagraphs 1A, B, C, D, or E. So the legislature looked at this and said, we recognize there are situations where lots have private rights-of-way. we are not intending to allow those to be frontage. And so if you're going to have a waiver from that, it's clearly not intended that this is a situation where the waiver is going to be applicable, in my opinion.
But,
How do you see it, Mr. Winters?
I more or less follow, probably not on the highest of levels, but I somewhat follow what Ms. Spector is saying, and I absolutely respect her viewpoint, but I also am hard pressed to interpret the statute in a way that I think could almost never, I'm hard pressed to interpret it so that the legislature would give us the power to appeal something when we can barely think of an example when it might be approved. That would, then we could just throw this whole thing away, which I'm sure a lot of people would like to do. So,
Well, it also makes you question when that was written, how long ago was it written, and is it kind of like some of our own zoning that needs to be
1983.
rewritten?
No, it was recodified in
Okay.
'83. It was written years before
Yeah,
that.
so
But they've updated it over the years.
Yeah.
And
I mean, if
they've never changed that
yeah,
language.
if we had more time and resource, I mean, I'm not saying we should do that, I'm just throwing this out. I mean, we could ask for just for the attorney city council to do some research on that language for us and try to, but,
Oh, you won't find anything.
yeah, we won't find anything. I'll take your word for it.
Well, I don't want to waste it.
Yeah, we don't want to waste it. So, to me, I can only interpret that language kind of just aspirationally, not really having very clear cut guidance as a specific criteria. I realize
Kind of like
this is Inspector Morgan's.
a well-regulated militia.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, there was a day when you really couldn't grant a variance either, and that
Yeah.
day was a long period in time.
Right. Of course, there was a day before that when there's no zoning at all.
No, and life went on.
Yeah. So I realize we're courting an appeal, so to speak, and I'm also I appreciate what Mr. Hall is saying. I mean, frankly, it would probably be better if we didn't, just because of the access issue, but I think that it is pretty clear that we do have the authority.
Oh, we have the
So
authority.
I think we have to rule on it because he brought it to us and we have the authority, and I think all the other criteria to me are clearly met. I can't really wrap my head around what the legislature means by related to existing or proposed streets in a way that would make any use of the statute. So I'm going to interpret that pretty broadly. So
Okay.
so I would tend to approve it. I'm sorry.
Mr. Walden?
I'm sorry, it's kind of a
See,
torture.
I don't have the legal minds that these two have, so.
You have many other good habits as well.
This is a tough one. I think Andrew sort of hit it right at the end when he said they do sort of meet the criteria. And I'm inclined to support it. I mean, we already approved the variance, and I think in that same spirit, although it involves different kind of legal language, I'm inclined to support it.
Mr. Monahan?
From the previous one, before this, I seemed to, I think you saw, my view was initially private road is a way to deal with this. But I think Chris kind of persuaded me, yeah, but this is a narrow, it's just one piece of property. If anything else were going to happen there, it would require similar action on our part. So, and then with regard to, what we heard from code enforcement is it sounded like the folks that support us, code enforcement, planning, city solicitor's office are all agreeing with me. Private road is a way to do this thing. So, but I'm not, not blind to the fact that, it puts more time and burden on the applicant. So I don't have an answer other than I could leave and let Brenda or Mark sit.
Pick me.
We do have to make a decision.
No, that tar baby is stuck to you.
And this, the process doesn't run out for us. Well, I mean, I'd be interested in more in insight, rather than just David trying to have to explain to us on the fly what the other departments in city government were thinking about this. You know, the process doesn't always invite them to come and testify, sometimes they do.
Right.
So that's what my thinking is forming on this.
Okay. One way to look at the question of whether, I think the question of whether or not it needs to relate to the existing street is a key one here. As I don't have any problem with the other criteria. I think we meet those with no difficulty. One way to look at since the Supreme Court has not pronounced, one way to look at this is to say, well, what is the connection to an existing street? What is the rationale for that? And we've discussed that. It has to do with access for public safety equipment, ambulances and fire trucks and so forth. So assuming we, in our own judgment, believed that in this specific case, the intent of the ordinance of providing access for that equipment was met by the existence of the driveway to this lot alone, because that's all we're being asked to consider, then I think we could satisfy ourselves that we have met that criterion, or that they have met that criterion. We have to meet any criterion, but that they have met the criterion, that they have presented a situation where the reason for the relationship to the streets doesn't exist, because they do have access to the lot that is sufficient to create safety. So I think you can make an argument that we grant the waiver. Now, as to the question of whether or not the city council and the planning board ought to do this, the state legislature has already said it could be any of the three. So it's a reasonable thing for them to come to us, and I think it's a reasonable thing for us to consider it. And if we find the criteria are met, to grant the waiver. So that's how I look at it. But I can see a lot smarter people than I am disagreeing with that. But that is how I see it. Notwithstanding the objections of staff and so forth, in this case with this ordinance, and my vast knowledge of law and procedure, that's how I look at it. So, we've all spoken. Would anyone care to make a motion? Really, the only motion we can make, I guess, is to grant the waiver. Or I guess we can, our usual procedure is we have to have 3 votes to pass a motion, so that the waiver, we could also have a motion not to grant a waiver, which isn't to say deny a waiver, but we just chose not to grant it.
David?
Can you consider the limits of liability? I don't know if the board.
Yeah, well, we don't have a motion yet.
I'm just saying, could you consider that if you're making a motion?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that limiting the city's liability?
Yeah.
Can we also condition, just as we often condition variances, can we condition a waiver on them expanding the road as they've represented?
They said we could, in the law, it says we can do any reasonable condition,
Oh,
as I read it.
yeah.
So yes, I would think so. Would you think so? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we have that authority as a ZBA to get into design criteria.
I think all approvals are implicitly conditioned on representations applicants
Yeah.
make before the board.
And we do, to some extent, get into design criteria to the extent that they're presented to us.
Right, as far as the.
Yeah,
table of
no, we
dimension
don't undertake to
requirements.
redesign the floor plan, but
Yeah.
sometimes I would like to, but that's the story
You're
altogether.
telling me.
I would move to grant the appeal for the reasons that have been stated, that we think they meet all the criteria, the relating to the road, relating to the existing or proposed street criteria being particularly ambiguous. I've interpreted broadly enough to think this qualifies, although I certainly understand the contrary view. So I would move to approve it, and on the condition that the city, and you can
Here, just read this.
thank you.
Thank you.
That prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall produce evidence that notice of the limits of municipal responsibility and liability has been recorded in the county registry of the deeds
for which the building permit is sought, thank you. And also, and I understand that enforcement may have concerns about how they would enforce this, but nevertheless, I'm gonna also add a condition that they widen the road as they represent it. Or expand the existing driveway as they've represented.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No?
The vote is 3-2. Waiver is granted.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have other business? We have the minutes. Is there a second? Second on the minutes?
Second.
Some of the switching between myself and Ms. Perkins was left out.
I'm sorry?
Some of the switching between myself and Ms. Perkins was left out.
Oh, the minutes?
Yeah.
I don't think
Oh, yeah, I can do that.
Well, we can vote to approve the minutes
As amended by.
yeah.
And I know that.
I second.
Andrew second. We'll second
Okay.
that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
I abstain.
Okay. And now the finding of fact, where are we at on that? Do we need to approve those again tonight?
Yes, every month you approve
So
the last.
moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye? Anyone opposed?
I abstain.
Ms. Spector Morgan abstains because she didn't find those facts.
I didn't, I wasn't here.
What's October look like?
October looks very light. I think there'll be 4, maybe 5 cases, depending on what happens the rest of this week.
Wow.
Fairly simple, nothing really complex as of
What
yet.
have you done to beat people into submission?
So what I've done is we've now hired a new zoning administrator.
Well done.
She will start September 30th, so I will be here definitely for the October ZBA, possibly November, but I think Anne Marie Skinner will be taking over that oversight of the.
Oh, yeah,
position
we
now.
met her, yeah, right, great.
Correct, so.
Yeah, she seemed good.
I will be involved in the
Seconded minutes.
periphery, trying to support it, and
He says yes. I said yes.
Now, last month you sent, was it last month or the month before?
last month,
You sent me an example of a write-up.
correct, for findings of fact, and
Yeah.
I request the board hold that thought, and you as chair, we are still working with legal counsel as to how we would like to approach that.
Okay.
And they have not come back to me as of yet to what they want to see findings of fact look like
Okay.
to meet the new requirements.
All right.
And I'd love
I
some
had
help
sent
if you-
some suggestions for how
Oh, yeah.
to word it.
Oh, good.
And also, because it wasn't a public meeting, I didn't send it to everybody.
Right. So
I
we-
also said that if the legal office doesn't like it, I had nothing to do with it. I never said it.
We're still in the air.
We're still on.
We didn't adjourn yet.
Motion to adjourn.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I don't think.